First, number of mistakes. I've told you that when scribes copy manuscripts, they make mistakes. And maybe you're thinking, yeah, well, says you. Is there like evidence of this, or is this just one of your other crazy opinions? Well, again, it is one of my crazy opinions, but there turns out to be evidence. We have 5,500 manuscripts of the New Testament. It is striking that when you compare these with one another in detail, no two of them are exactly alike in their wording. They all differ. Why do they differ? Because people are changing the text. Well, how many differences are there exactly? So, scholars have wondered about this for over 300 years. In the year 1707, there was a famous scholar named John Mill, who was an Oxford scholar, not related to John Stuart Mill, whom you may have heard of before. This is a different John Mill. John Mill spent 30 years of his life studying the manuscripts available to him. He had about 100 Greek manuscripts that he could examine. And he had the quotations of the New Testament in the ancient translations of the New Testament into Coptic and Syriac and Latin and so forth. And he had some quotations of the New Testament in the writings of the church fathers. And he had a bunch of evidence. And he looked at this evidence. And in 1707, after 30 years of labor, he published a book called the Novum Testamentum Graeci, the Greek New Testament. In this book, he gave a few lines of the text of the New Testament, and then below it indicated places where the manuscripts he looked at differed from one another. So this was an apparatus of readings. The apparatus showed where the manuscripts differed from one another. To the shock and dismay of many readers, John Mill's Novum Testamentum Graeci, in the apparatus, he indicated 30,000 places of difference among the manuscripts that he had examined. 30,000 places where the manuscripts differed from one another. And he was looking at 100 manuscripts. We have 5,500 manuscripts today. Well, how many differences are there among these manuscripts exactly? No one knows, because no one's been able to count them all. Some scholars say 200,000 differences. Some say 300,000 differences. Probably more accurately, 400,000 differences. It's easiest to put it in comparative terms. There are more differences in our manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament. That's a lot of differences. How important are all these mistakes? 400,000 mistakes. How important are they? Two things to say. First, most of these mistakes, in fact, are not important at all. Let me stress this point, as I think Dan will probably want to stress it as well. Most of the mistakes we have in our manuscripts are completely insignificant, immaterial, and matter for nothing more than to show that scribes in the ancient world could spell no better than students can today. And scribes didn't have spell check. I mean, I don't know about Dallas Theological Seminary, but at UNC, it's a complete mystery. How do students turn in papers with misspelled words? I mean, the computer tells you it was misspelled. I mean, how smart do you have to be? It's got a red line under it. Anyway, scribes didn't have that luxury. Scribes didn't even have dictionaries. Scribes often didn't care how they spelled words. We know that scribes didn't care how they spelled words because sometimes you have a scribe writing the same word on 3 lines in 3 different ways. He just didn't care. And all 3 would count as a difference. Lots of differences don't matter. Sometimes scribes will leave out a word, they'll leave out a line. Sometimes scribes will leave out a page. I mean, that would matter, but you can tell when it's happened, and so it's not a big deal. Most things don't matter. There are some changes, though, that matter. Some of the differences in our manuscripts matter a lot. Not 400,000 of them, but a lot of them do, as we'll see in a minute.
Put simply, the New Testament is far and away the best attested work of the ancient world. And precisely because we have hundreds of thousands of variants and hundreds of early manuscripts, we're in an excellent position for recovering the wording of the original. What kinds of variants are there in these manuscripts? More than 99% make no difference at all. For example, the most common variant involves spelling. And this is a very common variant. It's far away. Oh, sorry. I was at Duke earlier today. The most common spelling variant involves a movable nu. You know, when you put N on a word in English and the next word starts with a vowel, an, apple, a book, that kind of thing. Greek does the same thing, but not all the scribes put that new on there. And so some of them said a book, a apple. You know, but it means the same thing. The smallest group of variants are those that are both meaningful and viable. What I mean by meaningful is that they change the meaning of the text to some degree. And viable means that they have a good chance of representing the original wording. Less than 1% of all textual variants fit this group, as Bart and I would both agree. For example, I'll just give a couple of illustrations. Mark chapter 9, verse 29. Jesus' disciples went out to cast out some demons, and they were unsuccessful. And Jesus said, this kind can come out only by prayer. Some manuscripts, most later manuscripts have, and fasting. So were those demons the kind that needed to be cast out by prayer and fasting, or would prayer do it alone? It's an important variant. And you can tell just by looking at me that I go with a shorter reading. So I'm hiding behind the podium so you really can't look at me. Revelation chapter 13, verse 18. Let the one who has insight calculate the beast's number, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Well, everyone knows that the number of the beast, the number of the Antichrist, is 666. But 170 years ago, a scholar deciphered an early manuscript that says the number of the beast was 616. And that manuscript has proved to be one of the most valuable texts of Revelation. And just 15 years ago, another manuscript with 616 was discovered. And it happens to be the oldest manuscript of Revelation chapter 13, or chapter 13, yes. Now, most scholars think that 666 is the number of the beast, and 616 is the neighbor of the beast. You know, he lives just a few doors down. But it's not a settled matter. And if 616 proves to be the better reading, it will send 7 tons of popular Christian literature to the flames. Although the quantity of textual variants among the New Testament manuscripts numbers in the hundreds of thousands, those that change the meaning pale in comparison. Less than 1% of the differences are both meaningful and viable. Now, there's still hundreds of texts that are in dispute. I don't want to give the impression that textual criticism is merely a mopping up job nowadays, that all but a handful of problems have been resolved. That's not the case. There are hundreds of passages whose interpretation depends to some degree on which reading is followed. And this fact leads us to our third question. What theological beliefs depend on textually suspect passages? In the appendix to Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, there is a Q&A section. The most telling question asked of Bart is this: why do you believe these core tenets of Christian orthodoxy to be in jeopardy based on the scribal errors you discovered in the biblical manuscripts? Bart's answer might surprise you. Essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. I agree with him. So that question is dealt with pretty quickly, I think.